So today we're talking about one of the most incredible figures from ancient history, Emperor Ashoka the Great, who ruled the Mauryan Empire. His story is it's this wild mix of brutal conquest, a profound spiritual change, and then a legacy that was somehow almost completely erased. It's quite a ride. All right, let's get into it. First things first, let's just get a sense of the sheer scale we're dealing with here. Back in the 3rd century BCE, Ashoka's empire was, well, it was massive. We're talking from what is now Afghanistan all the way across to Bangladesh. I mean, this was one of the biggest empires anywhere in the world at the time. A real heavyweight.
And that right there, that's the central mystery we're unpacking today. How does a guy who ruled an empire of that size, someone who made such a huge impact, just vanish from history? Seriously, for almost 2,000 years, the actual historical emperor Ashoka was pretty much a ghost.
So to figure this out, we've kind of got to put on our detective hats. See, what we know about Ashoka isn't like reading a straightforward biography. It's more like trying to solve a massive puzzle, where the pieces are scattered and honestly, they don't always fit together perfectly. So let's take a look at the clues. So what are these puzzle pieces? Well, historians have a few things to work with. There are his own words, literally carved into stone. Then you've got these really dramatic Buddhist legends that were written way, way later, plus coins, stuff dug up from the ground, the usual archaeological finds. But here's the kicker. These sources often tell completely different stories. They paint totally different portraits of the same guy.
Okay, so let's start with the most direct evidence, right? The stuff that comes straight from the man himself. We're talking about the messages he left behind for everyone to see, scattered all over his empire. Ashoka had these messages, called edicts, carved onto giant rocks and pillars all over the place. And this is a big deal, because they're basically the earliest examples we have of a ruler on the Indian subcontinent presenting himself to his people. It's kind of amazing. It's like he's speaking directly to us right now from over 2,000 years ago.
So what was he saying in these messages? Well, the main topic, the thing he comes back to again and again, is this concept called Dhamma. Think of it as a kind of moral code about living righteously, being a good person. And in his own words, he says he became devoted to spreading this idea after witnessing the horrific bloodshed of a war he waged to conquer a place called Kalinga.
But, this is where it gets a little tricky.
As the scholar John S. Strong points out, we probably shouldn't just take these edicts at face value. I mean, think about it. Is this a genuine record from a man who's had a total change of heart? Or is it maybe propaganda? A clever politician shaping his public image? The real answer is probably somewhere in the middle. A little bit of both. All right, let's shift gears to our second batch of clues, and these are different. They come from Buddhist stories written centuries after Ashoka was gone. And trust me, they are way more dramatic and colorful than anything you'll find carved in stone. And what's really important here is that even these legends can't agree with each other. You've got two major and often conflicting versions of the story. There's the North Indian tradition, which talks a lot about a son named Kunala, but then you have the Sri Lankan tradition, and it's all about another son, Mahinda, and his mission to Sri Lanka. They don't even agree on huge events, like whether a really important Buddhist council ever took place.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got the emperor's official story from the stone carvings, his curated PR, basically. And then we have these conflicting, almost superhero-like legends from the Buddhist texts. So what if we try to stitch these two very different threads together and see what the most widely accepted story of Ashoka's life actually looks like? So according to the legends, young Ashoka was definitely not the golden child. Far from it. One story, from a text called the Ashoka Vardhana, even claims that his own dad, the emperor, just didn't like him, supposedly because he had rough skin. So yeah, he was a total underdog, not the guy anyone expected to end up on the throne. So, how does the unfavored son become the emperor? Well, according to that Sri Lankan tradition, he didn't just ask nicely. The story goes that he grabbed the throne in an incredibly bloody coup, and to make sure no one could challenge him, he killed 99 of his own half-brothers. Whoa. Now hold on. Before you take that number literally, you gotta think about why the story is being told this way. The Buddhist writers who came up with this had a goal. They created this character of Ashoka, or Ashoka the Cruel, to make his later transformation seem even more incredible. I mean, the more of a monster he was at the beginning, the more amazing his conversion to peace and Buddhism looks later on, right? It's all about that dramatic before and after. Okay, So if we try to strip away all the legendary drama, what's the timeline that most historians can actually agree on? It looks something like this. He gets the throne around 268 BCE, probably after some kind of power struggle. Then, about 8 years into his rule, he launches that brutal Kalinga War. And that's the big turning point. After that, he really embraces this Dhamma idea and spends the rest of his life promoting it, right up until his death around 232 BCE. But what if that whole story, that neat and tidy timeline of one man's epic transformation, is just plain wrong? Now, there's this really fascinating theory out there, and I should say it's not mainstream at all, but it suggests we might have mashed two completely different kings into one single person. The whole idea really comes down to geography. If you map out where all those inscriptions are, you see something strange. The ones that use the name Piyadasi are spread out all over that huge empire. But the inscriptions that actually use the name Ashoka, they're all huddled together in a much, much smaller region in central India. So the question is, could we be looking at two different guys? So this theory, which comes from Christopher Beckwith, basically says this. Piyadasi was the big emperor back in the 3rd century BCE, the one who pushed that general moral code, Dhamma. And Ashoka, while he was a totally different, much leader king who ruled a smaller kingdom and was all about promoting Buddhism specifically. Now, I have to be really clear here. This is a fringe theory. Almost all mainstream historians are convinced that Piyadasi was just a title, a nickname, used by the one and only Emperor Ashoka. But, whether it was one king or two, no matter how much historians debate the details, the rediscovery of Ashoka has had this incredible impact on the world today. He's easily one of the most influential figures to come out of ancient India. So how did he go from being forgotten to famous again? Well, it all happened back in the 19th century. A bunch of European scholars and history buffs finally cracked the code of the ancient Brahmi script, the writing on all those mysterious rocks and pillars. And suddenly, they could read them. And just like that, the story of this forgotten emperor who called himself Devanam Piya Piyadasi, or Beloved of the Gods Ashoka, just came roaring back into history.
And his legacy, it's not just tucked away in dusty history books. You can literally see it every single day in India. The official national symbol of modern India, it's a direct copy of the top of a pillar, the lion capital, that Ashoka himself put up more than 2,200 years ago.
Better yet, just look at the Indian flag. See that wheel right in the center? That's the Ashoka chakra, the wheel of Dhamma. It's a direct callback to that code of righteous living that this emperor, once lost to time, tried to share it with his entire world. And all of this kind of leaves us with one last big question. Today, Ashoka's a national hero, right? A symbol of peace and just leadership. But his real story, it's not simple. It's not clean. It's this messy, complicated thing woven together from his own propaganda, conflicting legends, and a ton of modern detective work. So it really makes you think, what does it mean when our greatest national heroes are built, not on solid rock, but on a foundation of beautifully messy and contradictory stories?